A demon that has stalked your family for decades and turned your life into a nightmare is back, and this time, it's after your daughter. It can possess anyone instantly and wants revenge on you. Oh, and you're also stuck inside of an insane asylum. What can you do to save not just your own life, but your daughter's as well? Let's break down the fatal mistakes, right moves, and how to beat the Blood Moon Demon in Legions. A supernatural creature is about to terrorize this man's life for decades to come. Looking after the small village in the jungles of Argentina, this shaman Antonio Puijo describes a time in the missionary jungle where he came in contact with a terrifying demon. He dons a tribal mask while waving down this couple holding an unconscious girl. She's laid down next to the ceremonial equipment, while this elderly lady, Serena, quietly stares before leaving him with the girl. Antonio takes off his mask, kneeling down and inspecting her face. Suddenly, the girl's eyes open and she tightly grips his arm, forcing Antonio to pull away from her. The girl's body violently convulses as she stands up and lunges at his throat. Antonio forcibly pushes her away, running into the hut as she walks out of his sight. That's when she appears right in front of him, grabbing a hold of Antonio while he holds the door shut and looks for something to help cleanse the demon. He runs over, throwing a piece of cloth onto the girl. Antonio throws a vial of holy liquid onto her body as smoke evaporates from her skin. The villagers hear a scream coming from inside the hut, but the leader insists that they stay back. She slowly walks towards the building and finds Antonio caressing the possessed girl. An older Antonio explains that this event happened a long time ago to this blonde woman, Olga. He informs her that there are demons lying around everywhere that normal people aren't aware of. The doctor takes a cigarette away, wheeling Antonio outside of the waiting room as he complains about the non-smoking policy. He's taken to the leader of the clinic, Doria, who reviews his file, which mentions he was assigned to the clinic after being found not guilty of murder because of psychopathy. Doria comments on his improving health, suggesting he leave his wheelchair. She compliments his theater activities within the hospital, asking him how he's currently feeling. Antonio admits the young people he works with make him sad, fearing for the future generation. Later, he watches a theater rehearsal as his creepily dressed devil slowly walks up behind him. Olga approaches him to scold the man for wearing his costume off stage, demanding him to join the others now. She offers for Antonio to join them on stage, but he tells her that he has no interest in acting. She confronts the man on his poor attitude, insisting that he stop drowning in his sadness and do something about it. The other actors approach to inform her that this man Roberto has an issue with the script. The bald man directly asks Antonio to recall what his character says during the scene, being confused about his phrase, "Go demon from the four hells." Antonio refuses to respond while they continue to pester him about their lines not making sense. He informs the actor that these stories are based on his own life experiences, as they tell Antonio that his script is being changed by this man Roberto. That's when Antonio interrupts the rehearsal, informing the director that a shaman can't stare into a creature's eyes or they would lose their power. Frustrated, the director confronts him on how ridiculous his stories seem. Antonio tells them they should do another play or stick with his original vision. The actors insist they want to keep it as accurate as possible. The director decides to take a break and storms off stage, while the others consider replacing Roberto. Olga refuses to change him, telling them that this is already the third director. Antonio interrupts to ask them if they'd like to hear the most important story of his life, gathering the attention of everyone around him. The man reveals that he has a daughter who was born under a blood-red moon, with the woman from the tribal community he was living with. After a violent birth, the newborn was carried back to him, and they were now a family. But there was a problem. That night, Antonio noticed something wrong with his wife. She's whispering to Quaraya, offering the demon their child. He stands up to see a strange figure circling his hut. He walks outside the check, kicking around the drawing of a cursed symbol on the dirt outside his hut. The next morning, Antonio walks to the waterfall where he sets up a place of prayer and conducts a ritual to protect his newborn child. A local woman, Isarina, helps and weaves a necklace made up of ornaments, blowing smoke over it, and protect her from evil, the most dangerous spirit the girl can encounter, called Quaraya. That night, Antonio spots his wife walking strangely slow and mindlessly outside their house. The apparition suddenly turns into a deadly creature. He sees his wife lying on the bed again and goes inside. Her eyes and mouth leak a black liquid, and the man realizes Quaraya has killed her. Okay, that's unfortunate. Elena's mother, Amanda, is now dead. That's horrible for many reasons. Yes, all the awful things that come from losing a parent will now be a part of Elena's life. But there are also bigger repercussions from this death. Quaraya is now much closer to taking the child's soul. Amanda's death would have been hard to avoid. She was weakened by the strenuous birth of Elena. She came from a different community than Antonio, likely one with different beliefs, so her own faith and ability to ward off demons would be different than Antonio's. Although Antonio had help from Isarina, the old woman, during and following Elena's birth, this was still not enough to save Amanda. Perhaps they should have made her a sacred necklace as well, though considering that she was already possessed by Quaraya, the necklace might have had no effect. Undoubtedly, it will be nearly impossible for Antonio to shrug off such a devastating loss, yet perhaps easier for Elena as she's still an infant. She will grow up with no memory of her mother. The next few years are going to be some of the most crucial in Elena's life. Claraya is after her blood, that's clear. The strange conditions of the child's birth, specifically being born on a blood red moon and to a shaman, have put her at risk. Neither of these could have been altered, so the upbringing of the child is the key to her survival. As Serena points out, her faith must save her. The necklace that Antonio and Serena made is something of an amulet that will help ward off Claraya and presumably other evil spirits. Keeping it around Elena's neck is a foregone conclusion, but perhaps there are other ways to help her. Once Elena is of an age to understand, Antonio should begin training his daughter in their mystic religious practices. In this case, an early indoctrination is necessary to save her life. As a child, humans are more willing to understand any new concept presented to them. The older Elena grows without learning the truth of her heritage, her mother's death, and how to fight against these mystical creatures, the higher the probability of her rejecting all this information. That rejection will open her up to being easier prey to Claraya. The necklace can only do so much for Elena. The rest must come from within, which right now means that Antonio must train her. He can use Serena for assistance here, as the argument for the existence of these soul-eating demons, such as Claraya, will be more convincing if multiple people can not only tell Elena about them, but also give physical evidence. It would be an awful idea to try and summon Claraya to prove to the young girl that he's real. It's doubtful that Antonio would do this, since he's a shaman. Though Antonio will likely have other religious duties to perform, other exorcism-type rituals he must conduct. He could bring Elena to these to bear witness to the truth of the spirit world. Completely exposing her to all these dangerous situations runs a large risk. What if she becomes possessed herself? With Serena's help, which she seems willing to give, Elena can be slowly and safely exposed to these rituals from a distance. This will strengthen her faith and give her more protection against Claraya now that her mother is gone. In the present, the director returns to tell Antonio that he must stop distracting the actors or else he'll be forced to leave. Later, Antonio is visited by his lawyer, Marcelo Warren, who questions what happened to his arm. The man informs him that his team will be returning next week with good news about his case. Warren continues by commenting that his daughter is growing as a professional, working all day to survive. She seems to have achieved her dream of normalcy. That's when he moves back to the subject of Antonio and insists that he stay out of trouble from now on, ensuring that their case goes smoothly. Antonio is distracted by a news report on TV, which states that an astrological phenomenon of a blood red moon will occur this Friday, affecting human relationships around the world and potentially causing natural disasters. Somewhere in the city, a grown Elena works in an advertising agency. She's having trouble coming up with a slogan for a new advertising campaign. Her coworker comes over to discuss their campaign pitch the next day. The coworker expresses her stress levels are causing her eye to form a sty, for which Elena recommends a home remedy. When the coworker asks how Elena knows this, she quickly bluffs and says she read it in a magazine when she was younger, not wanting to reveal the truth about her father. That night, Elena labors over the campaign pitch. Her husband Warren, Antonio's lawyer, appears, and the two discuss their jobs. He leaves her with the work. Fast asleep that night, a demon slithers above Elena's head, waking her up. She stares at the dark corner of her room, waiting to see if something is there, then turns the light on to find no one. Meanwhile, Antonio eats food in the dining hall, being approached by a worker who informs him that he is a visitor, but it's not his lawyer. Antonio walks outside and finds a woman, Clara, waiting in the lobby, a religious woman Antonio knew when he lived in the jungle. She hands him a tobacco pipe, which he begins smoking. The substance in the pipe gives him a vision. He can see both Clara and Serena in the same face. They inform him that Elena is in dire trouble. Claraya wants to sacrifice his daughter on the night of the red moon, offering her blood as a gift to the evil one, a more fearsome spirit. Together, they must kill Claraya. To do so, Elena will need to restore her faith to be saved. Okay, something wicked this way comes. Things are gearing up for an intense showdown. Claraya is back, at least according to Clara, and it's probably wise to believe her. The blood red moon under which Elena was born will return this Friday, so Clara expects that is when Claraya will strike. She claims he will give the offering of Elena's blood and soul to the evil one. Whomever that is, nobody wants to meet him. How can Antonio save Elena? As we've known all along, Elena's best defense against the demon is her own faith in the spiritual world, but she has lost that faith long ago, though we don't know why. Antonio, on the other hand, likely does, and this knowledge will be crucial to restoring her faith. An educated guess will reveal that Elena has not spoken with her father in years. He's in the psych clinic after being tried for murder, of which he was found not guilty because of psychopathy. Since Antonio is having to ask his lawyer Warren for information about his daughter's life, she's probably not coming to visit him often, if ever. Communication between the two is necessary. How can Antonio orchestrate contact with her? For one, he could talk with Warren and ask him to attempt to arrange a meeting with his daughter. To Antonio's knowledge, Warren has regular contact with her and would be able to pass along this request. He doesn't seem aware that Warren is married or dating his daughter, which this connection will come in handy, since it's reasonable that Warren would have a great impact on his wife's decision-making. This method has a downside. It will take a very long time. The visiting hours of the psych clinic are unclear, but even if they allow visitors every day, it's more likely that Elena would not come the very next day, if at all. The clock is already ticking towards Friday's blood red moon when Coraya plans to kill Elena. She needs to speak to her father as soon as possible. A better plan would be to enlist Clara's help. Clara clearly has a working knowledge of the situation. She understood the danger that awaits Elena and found Antonio to warn him. It would make sense if Clara had some information about Elena's whereabouts. If not, considering she found Antonio, it should not be too difficult for her to find his daughter. This method might eventually be better than having Antonio contact Elena right out of the gate. Elena seems to have a strained, if not estranged, relationship with her father. She's not coming to visit him in the hospital, remember? If her father suddenly appeared and demanded to talk with her and told her a demon was on its way to kill her in just a few days, she would probably not react well. Who wouldn't? Instead, having Clara initiate the conversation will likely lead to more success in convincing Elena to come to the psych clinic. But what about Antonio? Is he best used just waiting around in his hospital gown? Probably not. He shouldn't come barging through and rile up his daughter's life just yet, but he should be prepared for a showdown with Coraya. He cannot simply check himself out of the clinic, as he didn't go there voluntarily, but perhaps others can help. Ward could petition for an early release or rearrangement of his situation, but that takes time that no one has right now. Instead, someone else should play their hand at his release. This could be Clara, but considering she's of no actual relationship to him, nor has anything to do with the legal side of things, she's not the most useful here. You know who would be? Elena. If Elena came and asked to retrieve her father for some time outside the clinic, the facility would probably allow it. Weekend trips are a thing, right? She can check her father out of the facility for a few days, then check him back in after the blood red moon and Coraya threat has passed. Easy peasy. The likelihood of that happening is pretty low though, considering Elena's relationship to him. So what does that leave them with? A jailbreak, or clinic break in this case. Overall, security seems lax at this institution, which would make sense if none of the patients are violent. All that would be needed is a large enough distraction for Antonio to slip out during. Now, there is such a thing as going too big here. If emergency services like firefighters or police get involved, things will get messy real quick and make things too hard for Antonio to slip away from. Instead, we need a one flew over the cuckoo's nest situation. If Antonio can rile things up from the inside and coordinate with Clara beforehand, he can slip out without being noticed. After all, he doesn't have much of a reputation for causing trouble among the patients, it seems. Maybe he can put his friends in the theater's crazy costumes to use and lead the security team on a little chase around the property and sneak out amid the runaround. Coming soon to a theater near you, How to Beat's official Patreon. All the guts, all the blood, all the screams, plus nasty extras. How to Beat's Patreon. 2 times the shock, 2 times the terror, 2 times the subscription levels. Have a damn good day, and it only gets better. Both levels bid you welcome to pre-sales for ghoulish official How to Beat merchandise and support the evil scientists behind the How to Beat videos. It only gets better subscribers are invited to the X-rated party. Ad-free and uncensored videos too repulsive for all audiences are available on demand. How to Beat's Patreon. In space, no one can hear you scream, but on Patreon, everyone can see you bleed. How to Beat's Patreon. Join us if you dare. Later, Antonio talks with his roommate about staying inside the hospital. His bedmate insists that it's better than being out in the real world, and Antonio offers him a cup of tea, drugged with sleeping pills. He gladly takes the drink while lecturing Antonio on having a more positive outlook, suggesting he read a self-help book. At night, he's approached by the devil-costumed actor Edu, who requests that he rewrite his character into a more complex role. Antonio tells him to head back to his room when a security guard finds the actor chasing him down the hallway. Antonio uses this distraction to walk outside and arrives at Olga's room, requesting a needle and thread. That's when the other actors approach Antonio and ask to hear the rest of his daughter's story. He explains that after his wife died, Coraya took advantage of his heartbreak, slowly causing him to fall into a deep depression and affecting his relationship with Elena. He noticed that the young girl began growing a deep connection with nature. One night, she hears a noise outside of their hut, walking out to see a demon calling her over. Suddenly, Elena is taken by Coraya, which wakes Antonio up. The man runs over to his daughter before she's killed, allowing Coraya to only steal the girl's necklace. Antonio now realizes that he's now her only protection from the demon, as her faith will fade over time. As she grows, Elena loses her sense of connection to the jungle, and Antonio moves them both to the city. She becomes grumpier and asks her dad to get a normal job. One day, she questions why Antonio continues to introduce himself as belonging to a sacred lineage, embarrassing the girl during normal everyday situations. She wants nothing more than to be an average kid and get through school unnoticed. Elena tells him that his strange attitude is beginning to affect her school life. Parents have withdrawn their children to avoid her, and she has almost no friends among her classmates. She blames him for ruining her 15th birthday birthday, when she couldn't have a party because she knew no one liked her and no one would show up. Disappointed, Antonio insists that they should be proud of where they came from, but she takes out a suitcase full of spiritual weapons and confronts him with how weird his job is. She opens the side door to reveal a possessed man tied to a bed in their spare room. Antonio warns her to step away from the man, who suddenly breaks free of the restraints and attacks her. Antonio rushes over to help, tackling him and impaling him with a stake through the chest. Antonio makes sure that his daughter's okay and insists the possessed man is still alive, but the guy isn't. In the psych clinic, the group realizes that a guard is coming and runs away. That's when Antonio pleads with the others to help him escape this place tonight. They agree, and Olga saunters into the reception area to seduce the building's security guard. She offers to give him a massage, carefully standing behind him with a pair of scissors and attempting to cut off a few strands of hair. Meanwhile, the others run over to Antonio with flashlights and wearing strange costumes for the upcoming ritual. They head to the stage where he informs the actors that they need to keep silent while he performs the sacred ritual. He takes out a small human doll along with some drawings. Olga arrives with the hair, allowing Antonio to continue conducting his ritual. He adds the hair to the doll, then pricks his finger and squeezes out a few drops of blood onto the doll. Everyone watches as it begins to burn and transform into a twisted version of itself. The actors run back into their rooms after the ritual's completion, leaving Antonio by himself. He plays around with the doll, twisting its body and stabbing its eye with a needle. Simultaneously, the security guard's face begins to twitch and his eyes won't stay open. Confused, his coworker suggests that it could be from excessive coffee. The guard takes a look at himself in the mirror as extreme pain washes over him and his body contorts in a disturbing way. Finally, he begins to combust as his coworker can do nothing but watch. The residents begin to hear a terrifying scream echo through the hallway and watch the guards running outside in pure agony. Sitting in her car, Clara waits as Antonio sneaks outside during the chaos. She brings him to a hotel and informs him that she knows where his daughter works. Now he has to make an appointment to meet with her. Clara tells him that he must dress nicely to appear sane and adjusted in order to gain Elena's trust, so that she'll listen and fight the demon that's haunting her. Antonio can't use his traditional ways any longer in order to bring his daughter back from a deadly fate. He dresses himself up in business attire while learning how to use a cell phone. He arrives at his office building and informs the receptionist that he's looking for Elena Poyu, not mentioning that she's his daughter. He's told that there's no one with that surname in their database. Antonio reveals that they're related, showing her a photo of when she was a teenager. The receptionist suggests that he bring a more recent photo and asks him to leave so she can continue with her work. Disappointed, Antonio walks out of the office before finding a list of employee names on the wall, ending with a girl called Helena Warren. Realizing that she married his lawyer, Antonio walks back to the receptionist and asks her to call the name listed, now giving his own name. Elena receives the call from the receptionist, but panics and makes up an excuse not to see him. He's informed that he must come back later. Shocked, Elena calls up Doria, the psych clinic manager, to question how her father manages to find the place, insisting that her real name is Helena Warren. That night, she arrives home to Marcelo, reveals what happened, and questions what they can do about it. She doesn't want any contact with her father, having erased all signs of her previous life. Marcelo consoles his wife by insisting that she made the right choice, calling Antonio a dangerous person. He mentions that this event will have legal ramifications for her father. Antonio stays at his hotel preparing the items for his upcoming ritual. He fine-tunes every piece of equipment, knowing that he'll only have one chance to save his daughter. The next day, Elena messages Doria asking for any new information on her father before she's approached by her coworker, asking what she thought on their new pitch. She continues by mentioning that Elena's ideas were particularly liked, starting with her slogan. She also mentions that Elena's home remedy for the sty worked. After she leaves, Elena checks her phone to see that they haven't heard anything new about Antonio and continues working. In his hotel room, Antonio begins devising a way to see his daughter. He begins submerging a disposable cup from her office into a boiling pot. Suddenly, black smoke appears inside the drinks of Elena's coworkers. She's oblivious, meditating as the others evacuate their office. Then her phone begins to glitch. She opens her eyes and notices there's something wrong with her monitor. She tries to fix it before noticing that the office is empty. Antonio appears in an adjacent cubicle, greeting Elena and insisting that she stay calm. Elena demands her father go back to the clinic and stop following her. She frantically tries to find someone to contact. Antonio informs her that she won't be able to communicate with anyone as long as he's there. That's when Antonio warns her that the Coraya is after her. He fears for the girl's life. Elena is shocked to hear him talking about the same demon from when she was a kid, with him insisting that she return to her childhood faith. She refuses to acknowledge this as truth and complains about Antonio protesting her life decisions. Antonio continues walking towards her while he insists that Coraya has ruined her mind. She's now only being protected by her heritage. Hearing this, she refuses to think of anything demon-related, but her father places a jar of protective liquid on her desk, informing her that the strong smell will repel the demon. She clutches her head while begging to stop the deafening voice in her mind, when suddenly, Elena looks up to see that her coworkers have returned, staring at her with no idea of what she just experienced. Okay, a slight change of plans may be necessary. Congrats to Antonio for getting out of the clinic. Surely they won't come looking for a missing patient, right? Well, they might not have before, but they certainly are aware of his MIA status now. It was not a smart move to burst into Elena's workplace with no warning. Surprising your daughter may not be the best move when she seems to hate you and is traumatized from her experiences growing up. Convincing her to sit down and have a logical conversation with you is a tough ask, but an important one. But that plan backfired and she bluffed her way out of seeing him. More importantly, she called the psych clinic after his arrival, which has alerted them to Antonio's general whereabouts. Antonio should have lied about his identity to the receptionist in the first place. This might have presented some problems in his gaining access to Elena's office, but at the same time, she would not have the same hesitations to seeing him if she didn't know who he truly was. Once he has her attention, then he can try to explain the situation. If checking Antonio out of the psych clinic was not an option, once he had escaped, Clara could pose as a nurse or other staff member when he meets with Elena. Here she could come in handy as a second voice to back up his claims, and the psych clinic staff costume might also give validity to what Antonio says. Supposing that the initial meeting had gone the same way regardless of how it was presented, Antonio needed to get the demon repellent liquid into Elena's hands. He didn't have to go to Elena in person or in spirit to make that happen. He simply could have mailed it to her. That sounds ridiculous, yes, but also she would have received the package for sure. Put in a little note about what the repellent is for, and there you have it. The risk of this is that Elena might throw the liquid away or simply never use it. She may even call authorities to respond to being harassed. Who can say? There's no set solution which would provide a perfect outcome to this situation. Antonio could give the repellent to Clara to give to Elena, since she might be more receptive to people who are not her father. Again, he could also call in Warren for help here, though his lawyer very well seems to be lying about his activities. Antonio didn't know what last name Elena was using at work, which indicates he didn't realize that Warren and Elena were married to begin with. Trusting Warren may not be in his best interest in this scenario. In fact, why not investigate the Warren situation further? If he was being deceitful about his relationship with Elena all this time, and they lived together, so it would appear this romance is well developed, what else could he be lying about? Here's another pinch where Clara could come in use. Warren doesn't know who Clara is. She could go to his office or find another means of running into him and simply strike up a conversation that's cleverly engineered to probe into his personal life. Any information he reveals is of value. This could be about Antonio's case and what the legal ramifications of his actions are. This would not be useful in the sense of protecting Antonio from the law because he has already broken that many times during his escape. However, understanding how Warren sees Antonio, if he thinks he's crazy, and Elena does, can help to develop a more informed plan of attack. The same goes for any information Warren might reveal about Elena's life. The more information gathered, the better things can be. If Antonio and Clara learn about Elena's new life, they can find slightly less traumatizing ways of protecting her from Quaraya. The biggest threat will certainly come on Friday evening, the night of the blood red moon. Simply knowing where Elena will be, what her plans are that night, can help protect her. Elena's faith is a huge part of her survival, but she already has some advantage because of her heritage. Antonio can take steps to protect her from afar by knowing her plans. Hopefully, aside from freaking Elena out, Antonio's apparition in her office has sparked some ounce of faith in her, but perhaps he should take a slight step back right now. That night, Antonio returns home to find Clara waiting for him. She scolds the man for abandoning their original plan and questions what he'll do now. Antonio informs her that Quaraya is feeding on his daughter's lack of faith, and he must find a way of opening her eyes to their heritage, reducing the demon's power. This will give them enough time to slay the entity for good. Clara reminds them they have others who can help, mentioning a man named Hariri, who specializes in healing beverages. She opens up her bag to hand over a vial of Igua, a defensive blessing. Clara gives him another vial called Ange, a protective ally, and insists that this is a powerful liquid. Later, Antonio begins the same ritual he performed when his daughter was born, laying out the foundation and blowing smoke onto his sacred vehicle. Meanwhile, Elena stares at the vial she was given when she feels someone behind her, turning around to see no one there. She heads back into bed and speaks with her husband to question if she's going crazy, when a demonic hand reaches towards her head. Antonio materializes in the room to confront the demon, but is pushed over and sent back into his hotel room. Now Elena is possessed, and the ritual was a failure. He watches as the terrifying demon swipes a photo away from the ritual altar and into the darkness. The demon reveals itself to be in the form of Elena's husband, Marcelo. He commands Antonio's efforts to remove darkness from the world, but insists that his daughter belongs to Quaraya. Antonio knows that this isn't the real husband standing in front of him and throws a vial of holy water onto Marcelo's impersonator. The demon retreats into the darkness, clutching his face. Suddenly, staff members from the clinic burst into the hotel room and drag him away. Antonio is knocked out and forced back into his care home, while Elena is still in danger. The next day, Elena mentions to her husband that she dreamt of her mother the night before. Marcelo insists that she take a day off work to recover from her father's antics. She considers it, mentioning that tonight will be the blood red moon, suggesting they observe the phenomenon together. Suddenly, Marcelo turns around and reveals that half of his face has been brutally mangled. She begins to question what happened to him before fainting. Meanwhile, Antonio opens his eyes in his room of the psych clinic. The theater group hovers around the bed asking about his daughter. They've added Elena into the play and ask him for the ending now that the story has been changed, insisting that they need to know immediately. Antonio's bedmate interrupts, telling the others that he can't hear them. He's been drugged. Meanwhile, a possessed Marcelo sets up his ritual altar. He takes possession of Antonio's bedmate, speaking through him, assuring the shaman that his death will come swiftly. That's when Antonio realizes all along that his bedmate was an agent of the Quiraya in person, recalling his large self-help book collection. The psych clinic manager, Doria, looks over the confiscated objects of Antonio. She inspects a vial of liquid, taking a sip, then drinking the entire amount. Through the drink, a small bug-like creature swims into her mouth. She then makes her way into the theater for a dress rehearsal, and she's now looking forward to what they have in store for her. The director informs her that they have based the play off of Antonio Poihu's life and begin their show. It goes off to a rocky start, with the staff assistant laughing at their terrible acting, but Doria is experiencing something strange. The other actors only notice their colleagues getting the words wrong and messing up. The director orders them to head onto stage and continue with the play, but no one realizes that Doria has been possessed. In his bed, Antonio wakes up and manages to escape from his restraints, but his Quiraya-possessed bedmate uses his telekinesis-like powers to stop him from interfering with the ongoing ritual. Suddenly, Doria stands up as her face completely morphs into a hideous disfigurement. She growls at the actors on stage. The entire rehearsal group runs away as she turns to her assistant and spits black blood onto his head. Okay, holy sh**, that's a big demon. We should probably kill it. But before we do that, let's backtrack some. Why did Doria drink the liquid in the first place? She didn't show any signs of being possessed prior to drinking the liquid, so it doesn't seem to be the work of Quiraya. It seems more like a really stupid decision on Doria's part. After Antonio was returned to the psych clinic by the staff, Doria received all the possessions in the hotel where he was staying. These were primarily shaman-related artifacts, including some potions, which either Antonio had made himself or Clara had given to him. As she pores over the objects in her office, why does she feel compelled to take a sip from the mysterious bottle? Then she drinks the whole thing. That's a really stupid decision, Doria. Now she's on a rampage in the theater. Had the staff member paid attention to his boss, he would have noticed her convulsions and strange noises. This wouldn't necessarily have given him much knowledge of what to do, but he could have stopped the play and gotten Doria medical attention, though that would have simply turned into more potential victims for Demon Doria. Alas, he was too caught up in the unintentional hilarity of the play to notice. Now he's probably going to die. His death might not be in vain, however. It could be of great use to everyone else in the hospital. Seeing what the demon wants can be a key to stopping it. If the patients in the play had not run away so quickly, they could observe the demon from a safer distance than this unfortunate staff member. Watching the demon kill or injure or otherwise interact with the staffer is vital, because understanding even some of its habits and movements can help you plan a defense. Of course, this is a horrific situation, so it's difficult to blame everyone else for running away as soon as Doria pops up looking freaky. The patients should immediately head to Antonio's room. The main actors in the play understand only a small extent of the shaman's powers, but they do know that these are real. Just a few days before, Olga and the others helped Antonio perform a voodoo-like ritual in order to escape. They must also be aware that he has since been returned to the clinic. Though they might not know whether he was returned with loads of ritualistic instruments, he still knows how to deal with these things. They are performing a play about his prolific bloodline as it is. If Olga and company go to Antonio's room, they will find him being strangled by his Quiraya-possessed roommate. This patient may be possessed by the vengeful demon wanting to kill both Antonio and Elena, but that doesn't mean the other patients would be powerful against him. This bunkmate has some vision problems, as evidenced by his one cloudy eye. This will make sneaking up on him slightly easier. They can tackle him to the ground, causing him to drop Antonio back into his bed. Even if they can't tackle him, they can at least distract him so that Antonio can become free. They have an entire psych clinic full of people, medicine, and furniture at their disposal. If they grab knives from the kitchen, chairs, or rolling beds, anything they can get their hands on, they can charge full speed at the bunkmate to overwhelm him. Doing whatever it takes to free Antonio is necessary, because at the moment, he's the only person in the clinic who has any real knowledge about how to defeat these demons. The other patients might not be shamans, but they can assist as they have done before. As a team, everyone has a greater chance of surviving. Quiraya may have possessed Antonio's bunkmate, but his body is still human, so he's much easier to fight than Doria, who is now a fully embodied demon. Clara arrives at the psych clinic and asks security about seeing a patient. She's informed that visiting hours end at 7 p.m. Meanwhile, Antonio is being strangled in the air by Quaraya. That's when the security guards hear people screaming down the hallways and find the theater group running from something. Demon Doria walks into Antonio's room, finding him levitating above the bed. She walks towards his bedmate and brutally rips the man's jaw from his skull, tossing it into the hall. She slaps him around before he tries to crawl out of his room, while the other patients watch him in confusion. He cowers against the wall as Doria approaches, blood pouring from her mouth. She grabs the man's upper jaw, ripping it off his skull. The head rolls back into Antonio's room as its eyes stare back at Antonio. During the chaos, Clara slips inside the clinic. She finds Antonio and drives him from the demon, giving him back some of his weapons. Meanwhile, Elena is laid on the ritual spot. Marcelo readies to stab her, but pauses, sensing the chaos in the psych clinic. He claws away at his maggot-filled face as Elena regains consciousness. She takes this knife while he's distracted and stabs him, crawling away before being pulled back. She kicks Marcelo off of her and reaches for Antonio's demon repellent. Elena runs out of her room and to the roof, hiding behind a structure as the demon comes her way. She opens up the jar and hurriedly spreads it over her body. Drawing closer, the demon fails to find Elena's scent, roaring in anger at the blood-red moon. Antonio and Clara arrive to see that the apartment is empty. Clara suggests they head up to the terrace, but it's there that she's snatched by the demon and dragged into the darkness. Antonio runs after her and finds the demon has abandoned her on the ground unconscious. As he examines her body, Antonio sees the demon approaching and swings his stake, managing to block the creature's incoming attack. Then the darkness beyond him turns into the jungle where he used to live. His deceased wife Amanda appears and holds her hand out, hypnotizing the man. Suddenly, Elena yells from a distance, warning her father that it's the Quaraya in disguise. Amanda's eyes glow red and her body morphs back into Quaraya. Antonio stabs the demon in its chest. He reaches inside and pulls out its heart, which melts into Elena's protective necklace. Alternating between his younger and present self, Antonio hands Elena the necklace, who puts it on. Clara wakes up to see the vision of Antonio and his daughter walking away. Now in the present, Elena declares her heritage and her sacred duty to fight evil, having learned an important lesson. White-collar work isn't for everyone. But what do you think? How would you beat legions? Let me know in the comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. And don't forget that from now on, we'll be uploading on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Until next time, have a damn good day.